start off with our little intro speech as you all filter in. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this masterclass on the SQE and social mobility with BPP. We're delighted to be running this session for you. We hope that you'll find this masterclass informative and get involved by submitting your questions throughout. I'm going to pass over to Johnny in just a moment, but before we kick off, I just wanted to go over some house rules. So first and foremost, please use the online question tool to post any questions that you have for our speakers today, and I will be posing them to Johnny and the rest of the panelists after the presentation. But the earlier you send in those questions, the more likely they are to get answered. Please don't send them in within the last 2 minutes because I cannot guarantee you that we will get to them. Please use the chat if you have any audio or visual problems, and a member of our team will do the best to resolve them for you. Please also note that this masterclass is being recorded. The recording of this session will be sent to all registrants after the session, and it will be available on the YouTube channel very shortly too. Please feel free to post about this masterclass on social media using hashtag LCM Masterclass. And finally, we've always got more masterclasses coming up, including one with BPP, where they'll be returning in April to talk about qualifying work experience. So just before I pass over to Johnny, I'm going to ask all panelists to answer a question appearing on screen so Johnny can get an idea of who is joining us today. So just let us know, you're a school student in sixth form, first year, second, third, or post-grad. Let us know. Just going to give that another couple of seconds. Brilliant, thank you very much. So, good amount of sixth form students, good amount of second and third years, and quite a few post-grads, it looks like, I think. So thank you so much for answering that. That will just really help the rest of our panelists get an idea of how they should tailor their answers to questions today. So, Johnny, I'm now going to hand over to you.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Neve. Just for those of you who don't know me, I'm Johnny Hurst at BPP. We are considered to be one of, if not the leading law school for the SQE. We've been teaching prospective solicitors for many years qualify as solicitors, including Grace, who's on our panel here, and we'll be introducing her in a moment. Just a little bit of background on me. I used to be a partner in a city firm specialising in commercial property. That was some time ago. I've been at BPP for about 15 years, where I've been teaching and coaching solicitors into their careers, and I'm really passionate about social mobility. It'll probably come out during the course of our discussions about my background and why this subject is so important to me, but I'm absolutely wedded, like BPP is, into widening participation in the profession, because there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. So without further ado, why don't I just hand over to Grace, who can introduce herself, and then we'll go over to Ali. Grace, so tell us a little bit about you, where you are in your law journey.
Hi everyone, so I'm studying the SQE 1 at the moment at BPP, and I've done it a little bit differently because I did the full-time training course for SQE 1, but I was working alongside it, and so for that reason I have decided to take the SQE 1 SRA exam a few months later than I would have done naturally. So yeah, that's me really.
Fantastic, and we'll explore why you've combined work and study and the need to do that obviously in due course. Ali, tell us a little bit about yourself. You're from the other wing of the profession, me being a solicitor, but you've got a very expert window of knowledge, and of course in your current role you are a great champion of social mobility. So over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Johnny. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Ali. I'm head of law at SEO London. We're a charity that educates and trains students from underrepresented and underserved backgrounds. I've been with SEO now for almost 12 months, so relatively new. But previously, I was a legal headhunter. I did the BBC, not the LPC, and was very fortunate that I got a full bursary to do the BBC from Lincoln's Inn, and that really sort of put me on a pathway to sort of go into work with the Magic Circle firm for a couple of years before I switched to legal headhunting, and I did that for almost 20 years, setting up a company that did offshore recruitment. So now I'm come full circle and looking forward to sort of continuing the good work in partnership with BPP.
Fantastic, Ellie. Thank you. And just to add, I also have my own independent YouTube channel, SQE TV. Check it out, everybody. It's a free channel. It's not an official BPP channel. It's my personal hobby. I'm very dedicated to supporting candidates, particularly from non-traditional backgrounds, so-called non-traditional backgrounds into the law. And that's the purpose of why I set up that channel, to support them through their SQE journey. So we've got basically the student voice, we've got the diversity voice that Ali represents in terms of SEO London, and we've got me as being the partner and also the educator as well. So we've got a number of different voices and perspectives to look at how social mobility intersects with the SQE and what our views are on it. So we're going to look at, just for some people, because they don't know what the SQE is, we'll briefly describe that. And Grace, you can tell us a little bit about your experience on SQE1, the first part of the SQE, a little bit on the way, but we'll just get that through to contextualize what we're going to discuss. And then we'll talk about how social mobility affects people in relation to the SQE assessments, how some people might pursue things like qualifying work experience to qualify, either through apprenticeships or some other route. And we'll talk about the issue of financing your SQE journey and how accessible the pathway is, which is there is a barrier there that a lot of people have discussed in commentary all over the media. But before we go any further, perhaps Grace, you'll give us a little bit of an overview of your pathway to the SQE, which is probably and qualification, which is probably represented on the screen there. Just talk us through your background in terms of where you've got to.
Yeah, so I did a law degree, so the first one, and now doing SQE1. We'll then do SQE2, and I'm applying for training contracts to hopefully secure the qualifying work experience. However, if I don't secure that, then I think I would apply for paralegal roles. And so long as you do 2 years of that, I think you can do a maximum of 6 months, minimum of 6 months in any one role, and then up to 4 different roles for 2 years. And if that counts as QWE, then you can qualify.
Yeah. I think actually it's a bit more flexible than that, but you're right. In up to 4 roles, ideally, if you do 4 lots of 6 months, that's right. But you could do one of 3 months and one of 9 months to make it 12 months, and then do 12 months in another employer. But you're right, you can only aggregate it in up to 4 employers, which is absolutely right. But fingers crossed for the training contract, for the 2 years qualifying work experience contract. And so that's the traditional pathway to qualification now through the SQE route. In terms of what the SQE is, we'll bring in Ali in a moment, but I think Grace is probably in a position to describe this, having been through the first half of it so far. This SQE1 preparation and for the assessment, and what I've done is blanked out half of the syllabus for a particular reason. If you can see all those subjects on there, so landlord, trust, criminal, contract and tort, I've obviously blanked them out for a specific reason, because they're not traditionally taught on any SQE course. Why is that, just for people who haven't been through a law journey so far?
Yeah, so these ones aren't taught because they're taught during undergraduate law or otherwise the GDL, so the graduate diploma in law, so that's the law conversion course. So I guess the idea is that you would have covered them already, you already have notes on them, and so it's up to you to kind of go through those notes rather than be taught it all over again. But there is other resources that BPP provides in order for you to revise them and go through them in other ways.
And then there's all these subjects we've got in black there, these practice areas that you've studied. So you've gone through a course and you've got yourself to a position where hopefully you'll be able to sit in July. And you just want to just give a brief overview, because some people don't know what a commitment it is to study on an SQE course, but also the type of the assessment that it is, because that is an issue itself in terms of accessibility and social mobility. So do you just want to describe maybe the assessment first, maybe just to put it into context?
Yeah, so in terms of assessment, it's do you mean kind of in terms of the assessment style, so multiple choice, single best answer? Yeah, so the assessment itself is multiple choice and single best answer, so potentially there are a lot of answers that are correct, but you need to pick the best one. So it might say which of these is most accurate, and they're all a bit accurate, and then you need to choose the one that's most, so it's not like there'll be one answer that's just blindingly correct and all the others are completely wrong. It's a little bit more difficult than that, or quite a lot more difficult than that. It's quite a long assessment as well. I think it's about 2.5 hours and then an hour break and then another 2.5 hours. So to kind of keep your brain kind of at its best for 5 hours is really, really hard. And to not miss out little words, it might say, oh, which one of these is not correct. And if you're in a rush because it's time pressured, you can easily miss that. So it's mainly just the sheer volume of material, I think, as well, that you need to remember, because it's a closed book. You won't have access to any materials during the exam. So that might be a way it differs as well.
Yeah, and so 90 questions in the morning, 90 in the afternoon. So 2.5 hours in total for the morning, 2.5 hours for the afternoon. It's actually 2 hours 33. I don't know why, but it is 2 hours 33. And then you do the same again a week later. So let's bring in Ali here, because multiple choice questions have been quite the subject to some controversy in terms of people from socially mobile backgrounds and some diverse groups, particularly those in the neurodiverse community. What's the sort of the take that SEO have in terms of being a diversity organisation, in terms of the style of the assessment, multiple choice questions? Does it, in your view, create a level playing field? What are your thoughts on it?
I think sort of the immediate sort of concerns at the moment is really sort of the transition period, where so many of the past papers are obviously LPC related, and sort of not so much, there isn't a multiple MCQ past papers that one can revise from. It's relatively new, so it's it's still sort of being tested in my view. In terms of what we do, I mean, a lot of our work is aligns with how law firms will run their vacation schemes, how law firms will assess on the training contract, on assessment centres. So there isn't as much multiple choice questions in terms of the work that we're currently doing. It's certainly something that we're looking at. But to address that particular question, it's our focus is very much sort of on building the commercial awareness of the students. We have partners coming in every week, top law firm partners, addressing key issues on a weekly basis, and doing workshops, negotiations, and case studies. So that's really the focus of our work. It's really to sort of up the the knowledge bank and the expertise from a commercial perspective, and making them more sort of rounded individuals in terms of their knowledge of commercial issues that would come up, say for example in an M&A transaction. So that's the angle that we're coming from at the moment.
So what you're saying is that the assessment itself isn't really aligned to the recruitment process, because the recruitment process deals with the law in practice, and although there might be scenario-based questions in these multiple choice questions, it's very artificial to, no client comes into your office and says, I've got this problem, which of these 5 options should I select? And I think therein lies the problem. Is there an issue from a social mobility point of view in terms of in having multiple choice questions that are quite focused in terms of nuanced sometimes? Does that create disadvantage in your view, Ali, given the demographics of your membership?
I think it can do. I think it's about how, I think firstly, I think intervention needs to be at a much early stage. I think that in terms of advising and preparing students for those types of questions, I think that if you're not used to that kind of question, and if you have 2 or 3 answers that look very similar, then I think for some students it might be more difficult than a straightforward essay type question. I certainly think that it's probably posing more problems. I think certainly the stats sort of back that up. I think in the most recent report, I think only 5% of Black heritage students passed the SQE2. Only 12% of working class students passed the SQE2. So for me, I think a lot of work needs to be done by everyone in helping and supporting students, with the SQE.
Yeah, I think all the statistics in terms of the pass rates, just if anyone wants to check them, I'm not familiar with the specific ones you've just quoted, but so all the pass rate details are on the SRA's website, and we will be returning to the demographics and how they're doing. But there's no doubt there is an attainment gap for Black heritage students and, for example, white students, a massive attainment gap. And that's something that is obviously a great concern to all of us. I suppose what was behind my question, maybe just to push it a little bit more, for example, if English was not the primary language spoken in your home as you were growing up, there would appear to be, possibly given the attainment gap issues, there might be some linkage between the fact that there is an attainment gap, and it might be because language is so important when it comes to drafting multiple choice questions and selecting the right one, that some people from multi-language backgrounds where English isn't the first language might be at a disadvantage. I don't know, do you think there's something in that, or would you think
I think there is. I think it can certainly be argued that sometimes it's questions can be lost in translation, but at the same time there is obviously an expectation that if this is a career that you are sort of aspiring to, then there certainly comes to a when if you're looking to work in the city and working on a sort of $1 billion deal, then there are some very talented students overseas as well whose first language is not necessarily English. But yeah, I think to address the first part of the question, yes, there could be some difficulties in sort of understanding if your language is not your first language is not English. But I think there is also at the same time probably a justifiable expectation that English, your English skills, language skills need to be top notch.
Yeah, and I know some incredibly bright people from all sorts of backgrounds, and we're not necessarily talking people where their English is second language, where people just have not been brought up in an environment where where there were round the table dinner conversations about the issues of the day, where you could articulate your thoughts in an intelligent way as you were growing up. That's really formative. That people who haven't done that feel a little bit disadvantaged because they're expected to articulate their thoughts in a way in SQE2 when the skills assessments come in, which we'll talk about right now. So just Grace, before we leave SQE1, what's in terms of your background, do you want to share a little bit with us about in terms of your personal situation? Because as you were doing your SQE1 course, you mentioned that you were working and had to defer your sit. So and this is something that's experienced by a lot of students. What was the background to why you needed to defer your sit of SQE1?
Yeah, if I can go back a little bit, if that's okay, for what you were saying earlier. So I'm neurodiverse, and I've got a lot of friends who are also neurodiverse and doing SQE, and I think that can also be another thing to take into account, as it's so language focused. I think there can be kind of a different way of approaching it that you need to kind of be able to fit in the examiner's mind. So just wanted to go back on what you said and add a little bit in there, but there is also extra time available for reasonable adjustments, and that's also something that they do. Yeah, in terms of my background, so I was on a low income bursary at university, assessed as low income, and with SQE1 I was lucky enough to get a scholarship from university to be able to study it, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to. And I didn't find myself able to apply for training contracts during university, so was lucky enough to get a scholarship to cover the fees and a contribution towards living costs. However, needed to also work at the same time. So for that reason, as I was working, I didn't feel able to sit in January when I would have, as I was on a full-time course started in September. But luckily it was flexible enough that I could choose a different sit for the SRA exam, even though I'd done the full-time course with BPP. So that's my background, really.
Thank you. And did you work alongside your studies much in terms of, I'm just interested in the balance, because I think what we're finding, and I'm sure Ali, your members would echo this, that people who are doing the SQE who come from challenging financial backgrounds are having to work alongside often full-time courses. So what was the balance of your study, your work life, paid work study life like, which is important for our audience to know?
I definitely found that I wasn't able to give the course everything that it needed because I was working alongside it. Because if you are doing it full time, it needs to be your full-time job. So I think either you can do it part-time and work part-time, or for me, because I was working alongside it, I wasn't then ready to sit when I would have sat the exam. But also it was 2-hour classes. I think it was 4 times a week.
Yeah, that's right.
Or maybe, or maybe more than that, actually. So I was able to do weekend work and things like that, but it kind of depends on how many hours you need to do to be able to fit it in, because I definitely found that I wasn't ready to sit when I would have done. So I needed a bit more time, but luckily there was that flexibility to have some more time before I sat it.
Would you, I mean, just interesting, on reflection, would you have done the part-time course? Had you sort of thought it through?
Yeah, I would have on reflection, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I think that's something to bear in mind for a lot of people. And I'm noticing this, that the part-time courses are becoming very popular, particularly with people that need to work to finance the course, and critically the external examination fees that, even though it means qualifying over a slightly longer period of time, you know, most of your careers are going to be 30, 35 years plus. What's another 6-12 months along that line if it gives you a better chance of passing? So I think what Grace has done in terms of deferring the sit was a very sensible approach. Let's just crack on and just talk about SQE2, which is the skills assessment. Now, Grace, you haven't started your training on that yet, have you? Or have you?
So I did start it. I've had a few sessions on that. Yeah.
So you're getting ready for these skills, and I think what a lot of people don't realise is that the skills only form 50% of the mark for SQE2. Do you remember what the other half of the mark's for?
Knowledge.
Yeah,
so,
it's the knowledge from SQE1. Yeah.
Yeah, so not everything from SQE1, but quite a lot of it.
And that's the challenging thing in terms of maintaining that as you go along. And there's a whole host of different skills that are going to be assessed, from written skills and oral skills. Just from your perspective, which of those skills do you find the ones that maybe cause you the most anxiety in terms of when you will have to sit them?
I think advocacy for me, because it was very new. I'd never done anything like that before. Legal writing, it's sort of like perhaps in an assessment centre or something you will have, or in work experience, you would have drafted an email to a client. But advocacy, yeah, definitely just all the different kind of legal terminology that you need to use, and the fact that you don't really have long to prepare your submissions, and you need to try and not read from the script. You need to try and just say them. So I definitely found that one really, really hard.
Yeah, and I think it depends on your background sometimes. If you've done a lot of public speaking, that's fine. But Ali, you'll come across a lot of members that have had very little, if any, experience. And how do you manage to coach them, particularly those from candidates who've not debated at school and things like that, to get confident with public speaking?
Yeah, I mean, as part of our sort of course, we do sort of negotiations and presentations, you know, and we sort of invite sort of probably about sort of up to 25 students for each session. So we run those during the course of the year, doing sort of, you know, an M&A presentation, or sort of any type of case study. But that's certainly sort of a key part of what we do, you know, presentation, giving them sort of advocacy experience. We will also work in collaboration with Google, who have a advocacy course that they facilitate and help us with. So we're very aware that is a key skill that needs to be developed, and we do that internally as well as in collaboration with other organisations.
Yeah, because certainly I've done some work. I was asked as part of a parliamentary research committee to help with a report they were doing on oracy, and there's a marked difference in terms of the ability for a candidate at 18 to 21, and it's really dependent on their formative years in their primary and secondary education in terms of what exposure they get. So again, if you're from a so-called disadvantaged background or underrepresented background, you start behind than other candidates. So it's great that SEO London and other diversity groups provide this support. It's vital, I think. Great. We've talked about the assessments and diverse candidates quite briefly, but what I want to move on to is to talk about the qualifying work experience and social mobility and apprenticeships in particular. And I think one of the benefits of the new SQE regime is undoubtedly the 6-year apprenticeships that school leavers can undertake. And I hear from Neve and the LCN team that we've got some sixth formers who are watching at the moment, and there are fantastic opportunities instead of going to university to do 6-year apprenticeships at law firms, and at the end of that 6 years you take the SQE assessments and you pick up a law degree in the interim as well. You basically spend that 6 years in a firm, 4 years working, 4 days a week working, the other day on day release doing your studies. What are the benefits, particularly from Ali, from that sort of model for school leavers rather than going to university? I think it's probably stating the obvious, but it is worth stating it because some people will be coming across this for the first time.
Yeah, you know, it's glaringly obvious, you know, in terms of the financial benefits of you know, getting that experience. So obviously you don't incur, you know, the student loan debt of approximately £45,000 over the 3-year period. You gain work experience, you gain you know, knowledge of the firm, you develop network, you know, you know, a book of contacts within the firm, outside the firm. You know, you gain you know, skills that you will not gain now at university. It's, you know, university is purely academic with a loan. You know, with apprenticeships, I think they're a fabulous sort of addition to the education system, and I'm all for it. So if you're on the call and you're a sixth former, and you know, do look into apprenticeships very serious, as a serious opportunity.
Yeah, I think a lot of schools are still pushing university as the thing, and I think it's unfortunate because there are league tables in terms of how many percentage of people get into universities, and I think that's wrong. They ought to be looking at apprenticeships as well as just as valid a destination, and they should be given equal weighting. And I think too few schools will look at it like that. Interested for you, Grace, now that obviously they weren't around, these types of apprenticeships, would you have considered one, or were you always interested in going to university and the university experience sort of thing?
A lot of the time I think, oh, I should have just done that if that was available. I think definitely pros and cons of each, but yeah, definitely. I'm not sure if I was kind of ready to know exactly what I wanted to do at that time. Even when I went into my law degree, I wasn't sure I wanted to be a lawyer at all. So I think it depends, but if you know at that time what it is you want to do, then definitely it's an amazing opportunity.
Yeah, and as Ali says, you can you start your network, and actually by the time you qualified, you know, you'll be working alongside the graduates, and actually you've got so much more work experience. You're so much more useful to the firm at 24, whatever age you are, than a 24-year-old person who's come straight from an SQE set of assessments, because you just know your way around the transactions or the litigation that you've been doing, and you're equivalent to probably of a 2-year post-qualified candidate, and that makes such a difference.
Yeah, I mean, and certainly at SEO, we've got a fantastic schools team who sort of go out and you know, to schools in London, and then this is something we've recently sort of also hired sort of a head of apprenticeship. So we're really sort of focusing on this area now, and you know, bringing it to the attention of as many people as possible, particularly our partner schools.
Yeah, and Ali, can you just reassure candidates that this route, or tell me, is this route considered an equally valid route and pathway to qualification, or is it considered an inferior route?
Oh, it's equally valid, and you know, there are some fantastic, you know, apprentices that have gone through this route who are now sort of coming out of that, sort of coming towards the end of that. And yeah, I mean, as you said, you'll get a law degree at the end of it as well. You know, it ticks all the boxes. You know, you've got the law degree that you want. The only thing you're going to miss out is the university experience. So you know, you need to weigh up what your priorities are and sort of make that decision. And you know, for our part, we're going into schools and you know, educating them on the opportunities, all of the opportunities that are open to them, whether it's a university, whether it's apprenticeships. But yeah, so they can make a more informed, you know, call in terms of what they want to do.
Sure. And of course, those aren't the only type of apprenticeships that are available for candidates to qualify as solicitors. Those ones we've just talked about, they're often called level 7 solicitor apprenticeships, where you go through a 6-year apprenticeship. But there's also graduate solicitor apprenticeships. So somebody like Grace, for example, could be applying. I don't know whether you've seen any of those apprenticeships around, Grace. Any of them attracted you at all?
I think I've seen a few, and some firms let you do their SQE while you're doing a training contract. So you'd do 4 days a week with your training contract, and then say 1 day a week or something studying. So that's kind of along similar lines, I think.
Yeah, and the benefit of that is, of course, again, it's like being sponsored, and you go straight into the world of work, and therefore it takes the financial pressure away, and that's obviously a great attraction for people who need a strategic route to qualification that doesn't involve going straight to uni with courses and exam fees that they simply can't afford, and that obviously represents another very viable route. And the great thing about these graduate apprenticeships is that they're not exclusively now being in the domain of the big city corporate law firms. There are local authorities, there are smaller firms, there are in-house roles available for these graduate apprenticeship roles. So pretty much any type of lawyer you want to be, there are firms now switching to this model from the old training contract type of model. So don't disregard them, folks, at all, just because they say the word apprenticeship. They're just as valid as any form of sponsored training contract, and you'll get great training.
Yeah, I think another thing to say more generally as well is just that any legal experience will actually really help you, whether it's for professional conduct and legal skills, legal services on SQE1 or every SQE2 module in terms of skills. It really will set you up for success, because a lot of people, if they've just been in education, get to those parts and they really don't know kind of the inner workings of a law firm or those client skills, those legal skills in practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ali, obviously with SEO London, you're supporting a lot of candidates from backgrounds which are challenging financially and challenging sometimes in other respects as well. And these so-called socially mobile candidates need a lot of support. What are sort of the flagship support initiatives that you've got? You've sort of mentioned a few of them, but you just want to highlight a few just so that people who are interested, and is it just exclusively London, or does SEO run wider afield?
Yeah, so we have 2 law programs. One is the Solicitors Horizons program, which is exclusively for students, undergraduates who are, you know, from socially mobile backgrounds. And that's sort of qualifying factors in terms of household income, whether you know you're a refugee, whether you're first in family to go to university. So a number of qualifying factors that you know that are required there. We also have a corporate law program which is open to recent graduates as well, where again, very similarly, it's a dual social mobility and diversity focused program, and that's sort of open to pretty much everyone. Sort of a vast majority of our cohort on the corporate law program is penultimate, 3rd year and recent graduates. Most of the on the City Solicitor Horizons program, we have an intake of a 1st year intake every year of about 50 students. On corporate law, it's about 300 plus students. So, and to sort of address the second part of the question, it's, you know, our intake is right across the UK. Last year's cohort was from 60 different universities on the corporate law program. So, you know, we don't just cover London. We have a fantastic separate outreach team who sort of go out to universities right up and down the country, from Scotland, Manchester, you know, right down to the south coast. So it's right, you know, it's right across the UK in terms of how we cover. Our sort of sponsors are UK and US law firms so far, but we are increasingly looking to spread out into sort of corporates as well. So we're engaging with a lot of financial institutions with big legal teams, and seeing if we can create some opportunities for our students in those legal teams as far as mentoring is concerned, as far as work experience is concerned. And I think one of the really fantastic things about the City Solicitor Horizons program is we create a mentoring opportunity which runs for 3 years at the moment, plus a dedicated 1 week of work experience that you get with your mentor. So we try to sort of do everything that we can meaningfully with what we have in terms of sponsors.
Excellent, excellent. I've just lost my picture for a second. I'm hoping I can get it back. Can you see me advance the slide here to financing your SQE journey? Does that advance successfully?
Yeah,
great stuff.
All good.
I've just lost the main picture with you guys, but I'll soldier on. So financing your SQE journey can be massively challenging, and there are all sorts of things. Maybe Grace, if you could give us an idea of what your strategy was, because you've got a course fees. I mean, let's just have a look at what the equation is. There's course fees to pay for, exam fees to pay for, because they are external exams and they're separate, and there's living expenses as well. And just to give you an idea of what those exam fees are, these aren't charged by BPP or any provider. These are charged by the SRA's appointed test provider, Kaplan. So they charge almost £1,800 for SQE1, over £2,700 for SQE2, and it comes to a whopping almost £5,000, and it will go up probably year on year as they review the fees. So there's that to pay on top of course fees. So if you look at the equation that we looked at a moment ago, what was your strategy then, Grace, in terms of how you would approach this, given your obviously challenging financial circumstances?
So my strategy was applying for scholarships that would cover the course fees and all the course fees and the exam fees. And then if I didn't get that, I would apply for training contracts where the SQE fees are covered. So when applying for training contracts, there's a lot of different ones. Some firms won't pay for anything. Some will pay for the course and maybe the exam, but not give you a living maintenance grant. So just it's really good to see what they actually provide, or some will pay for the course fees and give you a maintenance grant. That maintenance grant can vary hugely in terms of what it is. And then if you do the LLM or some kind of master's course, let's say the SQE with the LLM, you can apply for a government loan. You may be eligible for that master's loan of £12,000, which you can use for any of those things: course, exam fees, living expenses. So yeah, my strategy was to apply for scholarships, and if I didn't get it, then to apply for a training contract where the fees and the maintenance grant would included. Or if I didn't get the maintenance grant, I would have to work alongside it. So do it part-time, work part-time, or work and save up and then do it. Lots of different options, but I did get the scholarship, which covered the course fees and the exam fees and a lot of the living expenses, and then I worked to make up what was missing from there.
Yeah. And that there lies the issue, and perhaps the unfairness in the system, doesn't it, Ali? Because great students like Grace, in an ideal world, shouldn't really be working alongside the course, and therefore that creates the unlevel playing field. What would your advice be to members who've got obviously a very demanding course with pass rates that are very challenging as well, in terms of how to plan to afford something quite a considerable sum? Even if they get the master's finance of £12,000, they're still going to have to find living expenses plus the £5,000 in exam fees. What's the best strategy for somebody who's financially challenged and maybe doesn't get a training contract?
I think definitely have a plan. I think you need to make sure that when you're doing the SQE, that you can focus entirely all of your energies on the exam. I think in terms of planning I think one of the good things about the SQE that I really like is the fact that you've got the flexibility to time the sitting of your exam. And what that does is it allows you to say, okay, if you need to do a job and save some money for it, it allows you to do that. I think go in your penultimate year, I think start from your penultimate year of university to applying for training contracts. That's step number one. I think step number two, obviously, you start looking for scholarships, bursaries. There are a number of different organizations that can help you, foundations. Just Google them. And you know, that's a second source of financing. And you know, I think definitely you need to, you know, it does all add up with the prep fee and the assessment fee, and you're looking at anything up to sort of about over £10,000, and that's just the fees. We're not even sort of looking at sort of the cost of accommodation if you're, you know, you're away from home, and food and travel. So you know, have a plan. I think to try to, I would say, see if you can get a job for a year. Take a year out, build that, and that experience is going to be absolutely crucial as well. It will help you when you start applying, you know, for longer term opportunity. So yeah, I think that it's no bad thing to take a year out and do something meaningful, and save some money before you sort of look. You don't want to be, you know, doing those exams with the stress of finance, you know, on you.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'd certainly recommend that for people that are financially challenged. Don't put yourself under such pressure,
Yeah,
and don't feel you have to follow everybody else who might be going straight onto the SQE in your social group. If that's not right for you, don't follow the herd. Do what's best for you, for your mental health, for your financial health, and for your long-term career, and plan it. And yeah, I think the strategic decision Grace took was a very good one. I think a lot of people would just say, oh, well, I'll give the exams a go. But actually, if you feel ready, that's good. You knew that you didn't have the time to devote as that you wanted, so you're taking your time. And that, as you said, Ali, is the great thing about the SQE, that you can disaggregate parts of it and do it at your own pace.
Absolutely.
Which is good.
And I think that what one I'd like to sort of add on is, don't you know, always take an opportunity. If it means you have to travel, you know, travel for it. I mean, I remember many years ago where I just came fresh out of university. I had a job offer for a contract manager role with British Aerospace in Luton. I was at the time living in London, and I thought, no, I'm not going to Luton, it's too far. And that would have been, you know, that was a fantastic potential first opportunity. So, you know, if opportunities come up and they're not really in your plan, but they offer fantastic experience in terms of exposure to the legal sector, you know, that would have been a fantastic opportunity for me to sort of, you know, look into contract work, you know, fantastic in-house opportunity. So yeah, don't dismiss opportunities that are not necessarily what you're thinking of at that moment in time. You know, look at, there are government opportunities, there are legal opportunities in government, local government, you know, non-profit organizations. So yeah, look at everything, you know, not necessarily just sort of the city jobs.
I think that's great advice, and I think being wedded to a particular career pathway is actually going to be damaging to a lot of students, because a lot of you will never get there. It's actually being a bit flexible. Yes, I want to be a lawyer. I'd quite like to be an ex-lawyer, but I wouldn't mind being another one. And there are lots of things, and accept that you don't know all the different sectors in the legal profession. I don't even know that, and I've been around for many years. You know, you don't know a practice area is a thing until sometimes you go to a firm and they're practicing it.
Yeah.
I just feel that that's amazing, and so be flexible rather than quite narrow-minded. And I think that's good advice you gave there, Ali. We've talked about the assessment fees, and I think one thing about these fees, Grace, I think you're probably familiar with this. If you don't pass the assessments first time, do you know what the position is in terms of resit fees?
So you need to pay the same fee again to resit. So that was one of the reasons I knew that I couldn't risk that that sum and then not pass it. So that's another reason I deferred. I wanted to be sure that I could pass it, or as sure as I could be, I suppose. So that I knew I couldn't afford to pay that again to resit it, basically.
Yeah, so they're quite large fees before you start, just to pay them once. But given the pass rates, which we're going to have a look at now, there is, and I've done some research on this, there is a 56% chance that any single candidate may have to resit at least one SQE exam. That's quite stark. So a bill that looks like it's 4,500, well, for well over 50% of students, it's going to be a lot more than that. So it's about making sure that you're as well prepared as possible with the right course for you, and critically, as Grace has said, you sit at the time when you're confident you're going to give yourself a good prospect of passing.
And I think just to sort of on that, I mean, you know, the resit fee I think is £800-900 just for one paper. So
yeah,
you know, you're
for the SQE, for the SQE one, yeah. An SQE 2, it's an all or nothing paper. So if you fail the whole of the 16 stations, you have to sit the whole thing again. That's a whopping almost. Well, it'll be £3,000 probably in a couple of years' time, and that's a lot of money. So again, this is obviously one of these things that the SQE was lauded to be the greatest thing for social mobility. And in one sense, the opportunities and flexibility for qualifying work experience and apprenticeships has all been very positive. But the fact that we've got these centralised assessment fees and the prospects of having to resit multiple times makes it so much more challenging if, like many candidates, they're struggling to actually get themselves into the exam hall and pay the fees. And that's the great shame of this new system. And I know, Ali, we've talked about a campaign that I'm about to launch, and I know SEO London are very happy to support it. It is to actually put pressure on the regulators and say, you've got to create a centralised bursary fund for people from socially mobile backgrounds, not just a couple of dozen. There needs to be hundreds, if not 1,000 bursaries every year to support candidates, because otherwise the profession is not going to change its makeup. So watch out for news certainly from my channels and BPP, SQE TV, and I'm sure Ali, we've talked this already. Hopefully you'll be able to promote this as well, that this campaign is going to have legs, and we will put the regulator under pressure to look at this issue, because they just don't want to consider it at the moment, which is absolutely scandalous, really. They don't want to link or associate themselves with the problem, which is just such a shame. So we're going to talk about pass rates, because this is what it's all about, and why it's something that is quite critical. I mean, Grace, you're familiar with probably what the pass rates are. What would you say the pass rate is for SQE1 in particular?
Pretty depressing, I would say it is. Yeah, I think it's around 50. I think it ranges between 50 and 56%, and then it depends. Yeah. People might have passed like one paper, didn't pass both, so they need to reset the paper that they pass it. 2 papers in SQE1. Yeah, it's a bit worrying going into an exam knowing that that's the percentage.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to show you the results from 12 months ago. There have been results in July, but this was BPP's biggest sit, and we did a lot of research on this. The national pass rate was 51%, 54% if you were a first-time sitter, so obviously slightly higher without resitters in the mix. BPP got a much higher pass rate than that, 73%, which obviously we're very proud of. But it does show, even with us having the leading pass rate as far as we're aware of all providers who've surveyed the whole of their cohorts, there's still a significant number of students that are failing. We've got very, very good candidates at BPP, which is obviously quite concerning, that even 27% of our students will fail. And even those going to top city firms, you've probably seen the articles in the press in the course of the last few days. Clifford Chance have laid off 5 of their trainees after a first sit fail, apparently. And other firms are named in the press also, or in terms of releasing people. There's a lot of pressure, Ali, on these candidates. I don't know what your thought is, because I mean, you obviously have partnerships with firms that probably need to mind what you say, but it is a real concern, because my understanding is a lot of the candidates that are being laid off across the sector, across multiple firms, are candidates from socially mobile backgrounds, which troubles me greatly.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think part of it is also the economic background that we're in at the moment. So I think in perhaps at any other time, they would have allowed them to resit it and continue with a potential training contract. I was yesterday at Cleary Gottlieb, and they, this question actually came up, by one of the students there, that, would you allow a resit if we failed one paper? And they, I think their position was that, we would certainly, we would consider it. We wouldn't sort of outright sort of say, okay, that's it. You don't come for a training contract here. So there are, I mean, there may be some firms such as Clifford Chance who have, a strict policy. I don't know if it's a policy or not, but have that sort of approach. But certainly the firms that we're working with that sponsor our programs are, are somewhat flexible on that.
Yeah, certainly we at BPP and in working with the fantastic City of London Law Society that represents a lot of the law firms and speaks with providers like BPP, we have been trying to encourage firms to be much more generous with candidates. It's a new regime. It is much more challenging, and they're just not used to fail rates. With the LPC, very few candidates failed, but there is, in broad terms, 10% plus fail rate at top firm, and that's obviously deeply troubling to them. And yeah, they're dealing with it differently, I think it's fair to say, as Ali has said. Just in terms of SQE2 results, again, BPP has done very well, 20% above the national average. These results are pass rates are much higher because they include people who only have passed SQE1, so you'll have fewer SQE1, well, you won't have any SQE1 fails, take SQE2, so the pass rate will be higher. But with these pass rates, it does still mean that there are going to be a lot of fails nationally, and that's obviously a big concern because of the resit cost, as we've just mentioned. And having done the calculations in 2023, my analysis of the SRA stats was that's that 56% prospect of resitting. So again, does really mean that you've got to do a good course at a reputable provider to give you any prospect of passing with confidence. Now, one thing that I just would be very interested for Grace and Ali to comment on are, I've pulled some of the data, and I think I've shown you some of this, Ali, already, for candidates from various different diverse socially mobile backgrounds. So if either or both parents went to university, what's the increased chance of a person passing the SQE? Well, in 2023, it was between 6 and 13%. So that's the disadvantage to candidates from socially mobile backgrounds. For candidates who attended a fee-paying school or selective school, the chances of passing were between 5 and 10% greater. And if your main household earner when you were 14 was in the professions, like in law or accountancy and so on, there was a 4 to 8% chance of passing, a greater chance of passing. Now, in fairness, I think it's fair to say, Ali, this is something that is not unique to law, not unique to the SQE either. It's a cross-sector issue, but it is obviously deeply worrying that candidates who go through the same courses, similar educations, are still being outperformed by candidates who have a better start in life in terms of those metrics we look in front of us. What can be done to improve the prospects of candidates who don't fit in those brackets, do you think?
I think it's all about interventions by organisations such as us and yourselves. I think doing a lot of outreach, going to schools, making them aware, educating the schools, not just the students at those schools, so that they can continue the message, once we've, done the talk, so to speak. And I think what you're trying to do, in terms of, creating a bursary system and speaking to the SRA, I mean, that those are things that really need to be sort of pushed and supported by everyone. There is a huge sort of education gap. There is a huge financial gap, and plugging those gaps is we just need to be more creative in terms of how we approach these problems. But I think ultimately the support needs to come from the top. There are the biggest organizations, our sponsors are sort of some of the top sort of UK and US law firms, and they're incredibly supportive. But I think that the problem lies with the mid-tier law firms, where they don't necessarily have the budget, or perhaps or the time, unfortunately, to offer that level of support that we hope that we and expect, for these students. So, there is just a lot of, the work needs to be done. I mean, we do it through our outreach, going to schools, and, we do it through our education and training programs. Some of them we try to do sort of repeatedly. So if a segment of the cohort can't attend, we run them again. And so we try to do the best we can. But I think it's a collective effort. No one person, no one organisation can sort of be the solution. It's just a collective effort and sort of driving change.
But I think it's all about ultimately at the end owning your own SQE journey, and that starts as an undergraduate. But even if you've got yourself to be a graduate now, it's still about owning it and engaging with the many diversity organisations that are out there. Grace, I don't know whether you've engaged with any at all in your time as an undergraduate or a postgraduate, or have you got your assistance and guidance elsewhere?
Yeah, I think definitely a few I have, and then also got friends who have various other like diversity reasons who've engaged with a lot of other ones as well. I think just knowing that there is a lot more out there, wherever it might be, whether it's your university or your SQE provider or a law society, or just there's so many. So just they might not be obvious, but just continually doing that research into them, then they're not kind of evident unless you really look for them, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, we at BPP, as well as obviously have great links with SEO London. We have great links with Aspiring Solicitors and a load of other diversity organisations that are all helping to change the dial. But it's a collective thing. No individual organisation or individual can do it themselves. It's the profession itself that needs to change. And people like Ali and SEO London and BPP and Aspiring Solicitors and many other organisations are all part of the solution, but unless the regulator comes on board, and that's critical, it's not going to move the dial, and it does need the buy-in of those in charge of our profession. But here's hoping. Now, we've got a few minutes just to deal with some questions. One did come up in the chat here, and maybe I can ask Grace, how easy is it to get reasonable adjustments for the SQE1 exam, for example? Is that something that you're aware anyone has done?
Yeah, I've done that. Yeah, I've actually been really pleasantly surprised with how helpful they are in terms of that. So you obviously need evidence of whatever it is. So either a diagnostic assessment report or maybe something from a GP. And then you submit that kind of as early as you want to, submit that to the SRA, fill out all the forms, and then what I was really pleasantly surprised with is that they actually call you and discuss with you how it's going to work, what you need, what your adjustments would be, and they give you a personal kind of person who's like your liaison in that way, and you can email them with different questions. And yeah, I just found them to be really helpful, because some of the restrictions on the SQE, for example, you're not allowed to take water in, and I am prone to a lot of headaches, and I really felt like I needed water with me. I think you are maybe allowed to have water in a locker and you go and get it or something, and I wanted to have medication available as well. So just things like that, if you are able to have a reason why you might need that, they can be quite helpful with extra time, or maybe even a private room if you need that. Different things that they provide basically, but I did actually find that they were really good on that. Great
stuff. Another question, possibly.
Just
go on, Ali.
Yeah, just on that. Yeah, I mean, don't hesitate to ask the question. I had a friend at university sort of who was in a similar position where they needed time, and you'll be surprised how supportive universities and schools can be in those kind of instances. So yeah, just don't hesitate to ask.
Yeah, and I think you'll find that universities like BPP are much more helpful than the regulator will be. That said, I have heard the regulator being quite generous, as Grace has described, in terms of some of the allowances, but they are quite strict in their regime in terms of no food, pens and paper you can't take into SQE1, you get given I think you're given a whiteboard and a marker pen, that sort of thing. So if things don't work out with your particular needs, as long as you've got medical evidence to demonstrate you need access to water or you need access to medication, they will bend over backwards to help, as they should do, because they have a legal obligation to do so. We're almost ticking round to 5 o'clock, and I see Neve has appeared. Sorry. I think there's one or two other questions. Do we have time to deal with those?
I'd say we've probably got about 30 seconds left, I'm afraid.
30 seconds. So what's the best option to begin with to do, the masters or the diploma? I would say if you need to finance your course, do the masters. If you're eligible for masters finance, which you would be, having got a student loan, if it's your first masters, go for that, because that's the best option to finance your course, and also you'll get more learning built into your whole package, and that will make you more attractive to employers. So I'm just going to say thank you fantastically to Grace and Ali for their amazing contributions today. Really great insight into their perspectives on social mobility. Thanks for lawcareers.net allowing BPP to chair this particular session. And Neve, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, Johnny. Just to reiterate, Grace and Ali, thank you so much for joining, and of course Johnny for leading. Everyone at home, I'm really sorry that is all the time we have. I know this is such a vast topic, but BPP will be back in April. We also have our own SQE hub on lawcareers.net that you can look at, browse. There is so much information there. We really hope that you found this session informative, and there will be many more to come. Before you go, just a reminder that we'll be sending out a link containing a recording to the session that comes out within 24 to 48 hours after today. And a survey will also be popping up as you leave, which you can use to let us know how you enjoyed today, topics that you'd like to see in the future. And you will also receive an email with a load of useful links to the SQE Hub, links to the Diversity Hub, links to social mobility articles on our website. So please do make sure you check those out. Thank you again to you three. It's been an absolutely fantastic session. And I hope to see you at our next masterclass. Enjoy your afternoons, everyone.